She said it the same way someone comments on the weather. Sunday, the whole family will be together, my wife said, but you won't be sitting at the same table. For a second, my brain refused to process the words. I stood there in the kitchen with a grocery bag cutting into my fingers, the smell of rotisserie chicken still warm through the paper, my heart thudding once hard like it had hit a wall. I waited for her to laugh, to say she was kidding, to soften it somehow. She didn't. She opened the fridge, reached for sparkling water, and twisted the cap like she'd just told me the trash needed to go out. That was the moment everything shifted. I had just gotten home from work later than usual. End of quarter meetings ran long, and traffic crawled the last 3 miles like it always did on Fridays. Still, I'd walked in feeling oddly light. There's a comfort in routine when you've been married long enough, knowing where the light switch is without looking, knowing the sound the house makes when it's settled for the night. On the way home, I stopped at the market and picked up a small apple pie. Diane liked apple pie. My mother-in-law always said it reminded her of Sundays when she was a girl. I didn't buy it out of obligation. I bought it because for years I'd tried to be the steady one, the man who smoothed things over, the one who kept the peace. Elaine was in the living room when I came in, scrolling through her phone, the TV on but muted. A strange silence sat between the walls, thick and watchful. "I'm home," I said. She glanced up, smiled only with her mouth, and looked back down. I set the groceries on the counter and started putting things away. That was when I felt it, that subtle pressure in the air, like walking into a room where someone had been arguing moments before. "You okay?" I asked. "Fine," she said without looking at me. I didn't push. I'd learned not to. When Elaine got quiet like that, forcing conversation only made things worse. I just wanted a shower, dinner, sleep. Sunday would come soon enough. Sunday was always the same family lunch at her mother's house, everyone pretending they weren't keeping score. I had just lifted the carton of milk when she spoke again. "Oh, about Sunday." I turned with the carton still in my hand. For a split second, I felt relief, confirmation of routine, familiar ground. "The whole family will be there," she said. I nodded. "Okay. But you won't be sitting at the same table." The milk hovered midair. I didn't put it in the fridge. I couldn't. "What do you mean?" I asked, and my voice sounded thinner than I expected. Elaine took a sip of her drink and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. A normal gesture, the kind that would have meant nothing any other day. "It's my Mother's Day," she said. "It's special. I don't want any tension." "Tension," I repeated. The word tasted ridiculous in my mouth. "What tension am I causing?" She sighed, already irritated. "You know how you get. You notice things. You ask questions. You make faces." My stomach twisted, not metaphorically, but physically, like something had grabbed and pulled. I thought of all the times I'd swallowed comments at that table. The jokes about my job being too technical. The way Diane complimented me while somehow shrinking me at the same time. Mark is so capable. Not very warm, but capable. I'd taken it because I loved my wife. Because I believed marriage meant endurance. Because I grew up hearing that family was something you held together until your hands hurt. I set the milk down slowly. "So where do I sit?" I asked. She finally looked at me then. Her eyes were sharp, hurried, not angry, afraid of a discussion, afraid of listening. "You don't have to come," she said. "I'm just trying to avoid a scene." "Avoid a scene," I echoed. "Sunday is for my mother," Elaine said faster now. "Don't embarrass this family." The words hit like a slap. Embarrass. As if my presence alone was a liability. As if I were a stain that needed to be hidden. I stood there in silence, searching her face for something familiar. The woman who once squeezed my hand at City Hall and promised I'd never feel alone again. I didn't find her. Her phone buzzed on the couch. She grabbed it immediately. I caught the name on the screen before she turned away. "Mom." Elaine read the message, her jaw tightening, and placed the phone face down without showing me. 2 seconds later, my phone buzzed on the counter. A message from Diane. No greeting, no name. "Don't come. The seating is finalized." I read it twice, then a third time. Finalized. Like a guest list. Like approval was required. Like I was someone who could be edited out. Elaine stared at the floor. She looked like a child who knew something had broken and hoped not to be asked about it. I felt a tear threaten, but I swallowed it. Crying there would have given them what they wanted, proof that I was fragile, dramatic, out of place. I opened the fridge and placed the apple pie carefully on the shelf. The care I took surprised even me. Then I closed the door. Are you really doing this? I asked quietly. Elaine's tone shifted the familiar preemptive defense. I'm trying to protect everyone. Who? I asked. Your mother, you, or whoever I'm protecting you from. She froze for half a second, barely noticeable, but I saw it and something inside me sank. Don't start, she said. Not tonight. That was the last push. I walked into the bedroom and opened the closet. I pulled out a small suitcase. Elaine followed her steps sharp on the hardwood. You're being dramatic now, she asked. I laughed, once short and humorless. Drama is being erased and told it's for someone else's comfort. I packed basic things, shirts, pants, a blazer, my documents, laptop, medications. I wasn't running, I was withdrawing. There's a difference. Where are you going? She asked. Somewhere I can breathe. She reached for my arm. I stepped back. Not violently, just firmly. Don't touch me, I said, and the coldness of my own voice startled me. I passed her in the hallway, grabbed my bag, and paused at the door. I looked back once at the living room where I'd planned a future imagined grandchildren believed love was enough. She stood there, arms crossed, as if I were overreacting. Mark, she said. I turned just enough to look at her. She seemed like she wanted to say something that would stop me. Instead, she said the same thing she always did. Don't turn this into a war. I didn't, I replied. You turned my place into an empty chair. And I left. The studio smelled like cleaning solution and stale air, the kind of neutral scent meant to offend no one and comfort no one either. I dropped my suitcase by the door and stood there for a moment listening. No footsteps above me, no television murmuring through the wall, just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic rolling past like the world hadn't noticed I'd stepped out of my own life. I sat on the edge of the bed without turning on the lights. The city outside the window kept moving, cars stopping at red lights, someone laughing too loudly on the sidewalk, a delivery truck idling. Normal things, cruel in their normality. I should have been angry. I was somewhere. But the feeling that came first wasn't rage. It was grief. Grief for the version of my marriage I thought I had, for the man I'd been inside it. I replayed the kitchen scene over and over the way you do when your mind can't accept an ending. The carton of milk frozen in my hand, Elaine's voice casual and final. You won't be sitting at the same table, as if the table were a privilege instead of a place you earned by showing up year after year. I showered and let the water run longer than necessary, hoping it would wash the tightness from my chest. It didn't. I dressed in clean clothes and sat back on the bed, staring at my phone like it might explain something if I looked hard enough. Elaine didn't call that night. She sent one text, short and measured. We should talk tomorrow. Please don't make this worse. I read it, then locked my phone and set it face down. Worse, I thought. Worse than being told I didn't belong. Sleep came in pieces. I woke before dawn with my heart racing, convinced I'd forgotten something important. In a way I had. I'd forgotten how much of my life ran on trust. Quiet, unexamined trust. I was pouring my first cup of coffee when my phone vibrated on the counter. Bank alert, a new device has accessed your account. I frowned. I hadn't logged in anywhere new. I opened the app, my thumb moving on autopilot. Everything looked normal at first, balances, unchanged, no obvious withdrawals. Then I noticed a pending authorization, small, almost polite in its insignificance. A test amount. The description didn't mean anything to me. Tracy Consulting Hold. My finger hovered over the screen. Who the hell is Tracy? I checked again, certain I was missing context. Maybe an old vendor. Maybe a mistake. The amount was small enough that most people would have ignored it. I didn't. Not because I'm paranoid, because I work in operations long enough to know that real problems don't start loud. They start small, quiet, reasonable. I clicked into security settings. Recent logins. One unfamiliar device approved 2 days ago at a time I remembered clearly because I'd been in a conference room, headphones on, arguing with a supplier about timelines. I sat down slowly, coffee untouched. Memory surfaced the way it does when your brain connects dots you didn't know were there. Diane in our living room the previous week, holding my phone with her manicured nails like it was fragile. Oh, honey, your banking app is so modern, she'd said. Mine confuses me. Elaine had laughed. Help my mom, Mark. She doesn't understand these things. I had helped. I remembered now. Standing next to them, pointing at the screen, explaining, approving something, without thinking twice because, why would I? Because family. I closed my eyes and let out a breath through my nose. I called the bank's fraud department. The woman on the line was calm, professional, trained not to alarm, but not to soothe either. "Yes, Mr. Harris," she said after a brief pause. "There does appear to be an attempt to establish a new payee. It hasn't completed." "From which device?" I asked. "I'm afraid I can't provide identifying details over the phone," she replied, "but I can confirm it was authorized." Authorized, the word landed heavy. Authorization implied consent, my consent. "Can I stop it?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I recommend freezing your credit-changing passwords and logging out of all devices immediately." I did all of it. Every click felt surgical, necessary, cold. When I finished, I sat there staring at the confirmation screen, my reflection faint in the dark glass of the phone. My phone buzzed again. "Elaine." I let it ring. She tried again and again. On the third call, I answered. "Mark, thank God," she said, breathless. "Where are you?" "I'm fine," I said. "Why are you calling?" There was a pause, not long but long enough. "Did you do something with the bank?" she asked. I closed my eyes for a second. "Why would you ask me that?" "My mother's upset," she said quickly. "She got a call. Something about an internal review." "Who is Tracy?" I asked. Silence stretched thin on the line. "She helps my mom with finances," Elaine said finally. "It's not what you think." "What do I think?" I asked. "That she stopped, swallowed, that we were trying to hurt you." I leaned against the counter, the cool laminate grounding me. "You removed me from the table so I wouldn't ask questions," I said evenly. "And now my name is attached to something I didn't approve." "Mark, please," she said. "It was temporary, a bridge. My mom just needed." A voice cut in on her end of the call. Female, younger, confident. "Tell him to calm down," the voice said. "It was just a test. He won't even notice." The blood drained from my face. Elaine gasped. "Tracy, stop." The line went silent. Elaine came back, her voice shaking now. "You weren't supposed to hear that." I stared out the window at a man walking his dog at the normal morning unfolding without me. "I did," I said, "and now I know this isn't about Sunday." "What are you doing?" she whispered. "I'm protecting myself," I said. "Something you should have done." She started to cry, then real tears, not the controlled kind. "You're tearing the family apart." "No," I replied. "You did that when you decided I was an embarrassment instead of a husband." I ended the call. I spent the rest of the morning doing what I do best, documenting, screenshots, dates, times. I created a folder on my laptop and named it simply Proof. There was no satisfaction in it, only clarity. By noon, my phone buzzed again, a message from Elaine. "Can we talk without lawyers, please?" Without lawyers, without records, without witnesses. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back, "We can talk in public." I sent the address of a crowded cafe near my office and a time, 5 p.m. Almost immediately, she replied, "Okay." I set my phone down and took a breath. The calm that settled over me surprised me. It wasn't peace, it was readiness. 1 week after I'd been told I didn't deserve a seat, my wife was afraid. And for the first time, I understood exactly why. The cafe was loud in the way places get loud when everyone is trying not to be noticed. Laptops, open cups, clinking steam, hissing voices kept deliberately low. It was perfect. No raised voices, no scenes, just witnesses everywhere, even if none of them were paying attention. Elaine was already there when I arrived. She sat at a small table near the window, hands wrapped around a paper cup she hadn't touched. She looked smaller somehow, tired. The confidence she wore so easily in front of her family hadn't followed her here. "Mark," she said, when she saw me standing quickly, like she wasn't sure whether to hug me or apologize. I didn't do either. I pulled out the chair across from her and sat. "You said you wanted to talk," I said. She nodded, swallowing. "I didn't think it would go this far." "That's usually how it goes," I replied. "No one does." We sat in silence for a moment, the noise of the cafe filling the space she didn't know how to enter. Elaine rubbed her palms together, a nervous habit I'd seen 100 times before presentations or difficult conversations. "My mother is terrified," she said finally. "She thinks she's being investigated." "She is," I said calmly. Elaine flinched. "You didn't have to." "Yes," I interrupted, keeping my voice low. "I did." Her eyes flicked around the room as if someone might be listening. "You froze everything." "I protected my identity," I corrected. "There's a difference." She leaned forward. It was supposed to be temporary. Tracy said it was just to get my mom through a tight spot. A bridge loan, nothing serious. I watched her closely, not with anger but with attention. People tell the truth when they think they're explaining. Using my name, I said, my access, my credit. Elaine pressed her lips together. You've always been good with this stuff. You always fix things. There it was again. The assumption, the quiet entitlement. I felt something settle inside me, not rage, but resolve. Why did you take my seat at the table, I asked. She blinked, thrown by the question. What? Sunday, I said. Why wasn't I allowed to sit with the family? Elaine hesitated, too long. Because, she said slowly, you notice patterns. You ask why. You would have figured this out. The words landed between us like a confession. So the solution, I said evenly, was to remove me. It wasn't like that, she insisted. We just needed you distracted, not involved. Not involved, I almost smiled, almost. Who is Tracy, I asked again. Elaine's shoulders slumped. She's someone my mom hired to help with finances, paperwork, negotiations. In the voice I heard on the phone, I asked. Elaine closed her eyes. She's assertive. I let that sit. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone, placing it on the table between us. The screen lit up as I unlocked it. I spoke to the bank, I said. There was an attempt to add a new payee, authorized from a device that wasn't mine. At a time I can prove I was at work. Elaine's face drained of color. I froze my credit, I continued. Logged every access, filed a fraud inquiry. If this goes any further, it stops being a family problem and becomes something else entirely. You're going to ruin her, Elaine whispered. I met her eyes. I'm not ruining anyone. I'm refusing to be collateral. Her breath hitched. You didn't have to humiliate us like this. Humiliate, the word again. You humiliated me first, I said quietly, in my own kitchen. Elaine reached across the table, her fingers hovering near my hand. I pulled back before she could touch me. She dropped her hand as if burned. I never meant to hurt you, she said. I didn't know how to stop her. That's the problem, I replied. You didn't try. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and stiffened. It's my mother, she said. Answer it, I said. Elaine looked up, startled. Here. Yes. Her hands trembled as she swiped the screen. Mom. I watched her face change as she listened. Fear, anger, something like calculation. No, Elaine said into the phone. He's here. A pause. Yes, now. Another pause. Elaine covered the receiver and whispered, She wants to talk to you. I leaned back in my chair. Put it on speaker. Elaine hesitated, then did it. Mark Diane's voice came through, sharp and controlled. This has gone far enough. I disagree, I said calmly. It just started. You've always been dramatic, she snapped. We did what we had to do. What you had to do, I repeated, was exclude me so you could use my access without questions. A sharp inhale on the other end. Your family, she said. Family helps. Family doesn't hide, I replied. And family doesn't decide who sits at the table based on who's convenient. Silence followed, heavy. Then Diane spoke again, lower now. You're overreacting. No, I said, I'm documenting. Elaine ended the call, her hands shaking. This is getting out of control, she said. It already was, I replied. You just didn't feel it until now. I stood slinging my bag over my shoulder. Where are you going? Elaine asked, panic creeping into her voice. Nowhere dramatic, I said. I'm letting the process work. She stared up at me, eyes glossy. Can we fix this? I looked at her for a long moment, at the woman I'd loved, at the choices she'd made. I'm fixing myself, I said. That's all I can promise. As I walked out of the cafe, my phone buzzed again. Credit monitor alert, new inquiry blocked. I didn't smile. But I didn't feel helpless anymore either. The week that followed felt strangely orderly. That was the part that surprised me most. I expected chaos, angry messages, late-night calls, some dramatic attempt to pull me back into the story as the villain. Instead, there was silence. The kind that isn't peaceful, just suspended. Like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see which way the ground would shift. I went to work. I answered emails. I sat through meetings and nodded at the right moments. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, I was moving carefully, deliberately, as if every step mattered more now. Each night, I reviewed the folder on my laptop. Proof, screenshots, timestamps, email confirmations, notes from my calls with the bank. The credit freeze confirmation sat at the top like a locked door. I didn't feel triumphant looking at it. I felt alert. Awake in a way I hadn't been for years. Elaine texted twice that week. Please talk to me. My mom is not well. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I knew how this worked. Emotion first, urgency second, accountability never. If I stepped back in too soon, I'd be smoothing things over again, fixing what I didn't break. Sunday morning arrived quietly. I woke early in the studio sunlight pushing through the thin curtains. Somewhere across town tables were being set. Napkins folded, seats assigned. My absence was already accounted for. I made coffee and stood by the window watching a woman walk her dog down the block. I wondered if Elaine was thinking of me, or if she was too busy managing the mood in her mother's house. I wondered how many people knew my name was the one they tried to use. At 11:47 a.m., my phone rang. Elaine. I stared at the screen for a full 3 seconds before answering. Mark, she said, and her voice cracked immediately. Please don't hang up. I didn't speak. There are people here, she continued, breathless. My mother's asking questions. She says the bank called again. I closed my eyes. What kind of questions? She wants to know why everything is blocked, Elaine said. She wants to know what you did. I didn't do anything, I replied. I stopped something. You don't understand, Elaine said quickly. This is going to blow up. Tracy's here. That name again, calm, confident, always just out of reach. What is Tracy doing at a family lunch, I asked. She said she needed to explain some things, Elaine said, to reassure everyone. About what, I asked. Elaine hesitated. About the money. There it was, the word they'd been dancing around all week. I told you not to involve my name, I said. I know, Elaine whispered. I know. But my mom's saying she never meant to hurt you, that this was all a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't require hiding me, I said. Elaine started to cry, real crying this time. They're all looking at me, Mark, like I've lost control of something. Control, that was the word she chose. I'm not coming, I said calmly. I didn't ask you to, she replied quickly. Please, I need to know what happens next. I leaned against the counter, the same place I'd stood days earlier when my phone first buzzed with that alert. What happens next, I said, depends on whether anyone here tells the truth. She drew in a shaky breath. They're scared. So am I said, for different reasons. The line went quiet. I could hear muffled voices in the background, laughter that sounded forced, plates clinking. Then a new sound, another voice closer to the phone, female, assertive. Elaine, give me that, the voice said. No, Elaine replied, panicked. Tracy, stop. The phone shifted. Mark, Tracy said, her tone smooth, almost friendly. I think there's been a misunderstanding. My jaw tightened. You tried to use my access. We tried to solve a problem, she corrected. Your mother-in-law's business was in trouble. This was meant to be temporary. Without my consent, I said. Tracy laughed softly. Families do things for each other all the time. Not like this, I replied. There was a pause, then her voice lowered. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. I felt something cold settle in my chest. You already did that. Elaine's voice cut back and frantic. Mark, please, just tell me, are we in real trouble? I looked at the sunlight on the floor, at the dust floating in it. That depends, I said. Has anyone here tried to open anything else in my name? Elaine didn't answer right away. That silence was everything. I need you to listen carefully, I said. I've documented everything. The bank has records, my credit is frozen. If there's another attempt, another authorization, it stops being internal. What does that mean? Elaine asked, barely audible. It means investigators, I said, not family meetings. A sharp intake of breath. I imagined Diane's face going pale. The matriarch suddenly unsure of her ground. Mark, Elaine said, voice shaking. She's panicking. She keeps saying she did this for us. For you, I corrected, not for me. The call ended abruptly. No goodbye, no resolution. I stood there for a long time after phone pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. At 3:18 p.m., a new email arrived. Bank compliance notice. Additional activity attempt flagged and blocked. I read it twice. They were still trying. At 3:25, my phone rang again. Elaine. I didn't answer. At 3:40, a text came through. Please, she's saying she'll do anything. I typed back slowly. Then she can tell the truth. I set the phone down and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands steady. Outside, the afternoon rolled on. Somewhere, a family lunch was unraveling. 1 week after I'd been told not to sit at the table, my absence had become impossible to ignore. And for the first time since that night in the kitchen, I wasn't the one on the outside. The cafe was louder than the last time, or maybe I was just more aware of the noise now. Espresso machines hissed, chairs scraped. Someone laughed too hard at a joke meant for one person, not the room. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table where the light hit evenly, no shadows, no corners. I wanted everything visible. Elaine arrived right on time. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, like she was bracing herself. She didn't sit right away. She stood there clutching her bag, scanning my face for permission. "Sit," I said. She did. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt dense, like it could be shaped by whatever came next. "My mother didn't sleep last night," Elaine said finally. "She's been calling everyone. She thinks the bank is going to ruin her." "I didn't ask how she slept," I replied. "I asked whether anyone told the truth." Elaine flinched. "You're being cruel." "No," I said quietly. "I'm being precise." She looked down at the table, then back up at me. "Tracy says this happens all the time, that banks overreact, that if you just unfreeze things, it'll all calm down." I watched her carefully. "Did she say why my name was used?" Elaine hesitated. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her bag. She said, "Because you're stable, because you have good credit, because you wouldn't notice right away." There it was. Spoken out loud, it sounded as ugly as it was. "So I was the bridge," I said, "the quiet part." Elaine nodded, tears forming. "I didn't think it would hurt you." I leaned back in my chair. "You removed me from the table so I wouldn't see what you were doing. That hurt me before any bank alert ever did." A silence settled between us. Not awkward, revealing. "Why didn't you stop them?" I asked. Elaine rubbed her forehead. "Because it was easier to ask you to stay quiet than to tell my mother no." The honesty surprised me. It shouldn't have. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the table screen up. "I'm recording," I said calmly. "Not secretly, openly." Her eyes widened. "Why?" "Because facts matter," I replied, "and memories change when consequences arrive." She swallowed and nodded. "Okay. Tell me." I said exactly what Tracy did. Elaine took a breath. She had my mom sign some paperwork. She said it was standard. Then she needed an account with better standing, till she stopped. To what I pressed. "To show stability," Elaine said softly. She said it would only be temporary, that nothing would actually go through. "And my authorization?" I asked. "You approved something on your phone," Elaine admitted. "That day Mom was over. You thought you were helping her log in." I felt a flash of anger, then not hot, not explosive, but sharp. "So you watched me do it?" "I didn't understand what it meant," she said quickly. "I swear." I studied her face. She looked tired, worn down. But tired didn't erase responsibility. "And Sunday," I said, "why did you let her message me like that?" Elaine closed her eyes. "Because Tracy told my mom that if you were there, you'd ask questions, that you'd slow things down." "So the solution," I said evenly, "was to erase me." Elaine nodded. A tear slid down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. I let the silence stretch. People at nearby tables talked about deadlines, at vacations, things that didn't involve moral collapse. "Elaine," I said finally, "I need to know something." She looked up. If I hadn't frozen my credit, I asked what was next. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "They were going to try for a small line," she said, "just to see if it went through." A test, exactly what I'd suspected. And after that, she didn't answer. "That's what I thought," I said. Elaine reached for my hand again, slower this time, asking with her eyes. I didn't move. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. I considered the question, truly considered it. "I want the truth documented," I said. "I want my name removed from anything it's been attached to. I want written confirmation that no one uses my access again. Ever." "And us?" she asked. I looked at her. The woman I'd loved. The woman who'd chosen comfort over integrity. "That depends," I said, "on what you do next." Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, then pushed it aside without looking. "I'll tell them," she said, "all of it." "Good," I replied, "because I won't." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean," I said calmly, "I'm done negotiating my dignity." I stood and slung my bag over my shoulder. Elaine scrambled to her feet. "You're just leaving?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "This conversation is finished." She looked around, suddenly aware of how public we were. "What if my mom calls you?" "She shouldn't," I replied. "Anything she has to say can go through my attorney." Her face crumpled. "You already have one." "Yes," I said, "and you should get your own." I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. "One more thing," I said. "Sunday wasn't the first time you chose them over me." She froze. "It was just the first time you made it official," I finished. I left the cafe and stepped into the afternoon light, my chest tight but my head clear. Behind me, Elaine sat back down, staring at the phone she hadn't answered. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something close to solid ground under my feet. I didn't plan to go to Diane's house that Sunday. That's the part people assume later, that I arrived with an agenda, a speech, rehearsed papers, ready to slam on the table. I didn't. I spent the morning doing something far less dramatic. I organized files. I answered 2 emails from my attorney. I took a walk around the block and watched a man teach his daughter how to ride a bike, his hand hovering just behind the seat, ready to catch her if she fell. By noon, my phone hadn't stopped vibrating. Elaine called 3 times. I didn't answer. Diane called once. I let it ring. Then came a message I didn't expect from a number I didn't recognize. "Tracy, if you don't come, this will get worse." That was the moment I decided to go. Not to fight, not to beg, to finish something that had already started. Diane's house looked the same as it always did, neatly trimmed hedges, 2 cars in the driveway, music drifting faintly from the backyard. The smell of grilled meat hung in the air, familiar and strangely comforting. For a second, standing there on the sidewalk, I almost turned around. Muscle memory is powerful. So is habit. I didn't. I walked through the gate. Conversations faltered one by one as people noticed me. First Elaine's sister, then an uncle. Then Elaine herself, frozen mid-step, color draining from her face. "Mark," she said quietly, "what are you doing here?" "I'm here," I replied, "because my name is." Diane appeared moments later, apron tied tight around her waist, a smile fixed on her face that didn't reach her eyes. "You came," she said, as if I'd surprised her. "You said the seating was finalized," I replied calmly. Her smile tightened. "We didn't expect." "I know," I said. The backyard was arranged around a long table. Place cards folded neatly at each seat. I scanned them without touching anything. There was no card for me. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Instead, I reached into my bag and took out a thin folder. No labels, no drama. I placed it gently in the center of the table. The sound it made was small. The effect was not. Tracy was standing near the grill wine glass, in hand, confidence intact until our eyes met. Then something flickered. Calculation, surprise, annoyance. "What is this?" Diane asked sharply. "Documentation," I said, "of everything done in my name." Elaine stepped closer, her hands clasped tightly. "Mark, please." "This isn't a scene," I said. "It's clarity." Tracy set her glass down. "You're misunderstanding the situation," she said smoothly. "This was a financial adjustment. Temporary." "Without consent," I replied. Diane scoffed. "You're being dramatic." I opened the folder and pulled out the first page. A printed bank notice. Then another. Credit inquiry alerts. Timestamps. "I was removed from this table," I said evenly, "because you didn't want me to see this." A murmur rippled through the group. Someone asked, "What's going on?" Diane's voice sharpened. "This is family business." "No," I said, "this is identity misuse." The word cut through the air. Conversations died completely. Even the grill hissed quieter, like it knew better. Elaine stared at the papers, tears streaking down her face. "Mom," she whispered, "what did you do?" Diane's hands trembled for the first time. I did what I had to do. "For whom?" I asked. "For us," she snapped. "For this family." Tracy crossed her arms. "Look, this could all go away if you just unfreeze the account. We can fix this quietly." I turned to her. "You don't get to fix what you broke." Her jaw tightened. "If you push this, there will be consequences." "I'm aware," I replied. Elaine let out a shaky breath. "There's something else," she said suddenly, her voice barely audible. All eyes turned to her. "They tried to list Mark as a reference," she said, "on a preliminary agreement." The backyard exploded into noise. Voices overlapping. Someone swore. Diane shouted Elaine's name like a warning. I felt my chest tighten, not with panic, but with something colder. You used my name, I said slowly as a shield. Diane lunged forward. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I replied. You removed me so I wouldn't ask questions. And when that wasn't enough, you tried to tie me to your wrist. Tracy stepped back, suddenly defensive. That's not how it works. It is when it's written down, I said. Diane's phone rang. She answered without looking at the screen. Hello. Her face changed as she listened. Color drained. Her mouth opened, then closed. Yes, she said finally. I understand. She hung up and stared at the ground. Who was that? Someone asked. Diane didn't answer. I knew. Compliance, investigation. The thing they'd hoped would never arrive. Elaine looked at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. What happens now? I closed the folder and slid it back into my bag. Now I said everything goes through my attorney. I turned to Diane. Do not contact me directly again. Then I turned to Elaine. I loved you, I said quietly. But love doesn't survive when respect is rationed. Her breath hitched. Mark. I stepped back. You chose who mattered when you took my seat. I walked toward the gate. No one tried to stop me. No one followed. Behind me, the table remained set. Plates untouched. One place missing. As I reached the sidewalk, my phone vibrated. Bank notice, additional attempt blocked. Case escalated. I didn't slow down. The grill sizzled behind me. Laughter tried to restart, but something essential had shifted. They could keep the table. I was done eating there. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Not deeply, not peacefully, but without the tight knot in my chest that had become so familiar, I'd stopped questioning it. I woke before my alarm, the room quiet and still, and for the first time since that night in the kitchen, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. The next morning, I sat across from my attorney in a glass-walled office that smelled faintly of coffee and paper. He didn't waste time. They tried again, he said, sliding a printed email toward me. The bank blocked it. This is no longer informal. I nodded, I figured. He looked at me carefully. What do you want to do next? It was a simple question, but it carried years of weight. I want to protect my name, I said. Everything else comes after. He nodded once, then we proceed cleanly. Clean was important to me. No shouting, no revenge fantasies, just documentation, boundaries, and consequences. He outlined the steps: formal affidavits, written demands for confirmation, a complete separation of financial access and notifications that would ensure my name couldn't be touched again without my presence. As we talked, my phone buzzed on the desk. Elaine. I didn't answer. By noon, the paperwork was in motion. By mid-afternoon, the bank had confirmed the freeze would remain until their internal review concluded. Diane and Tracy would be contacted directly, not by me. That evening, Elaine came to my office. The receptionist called first. There's a woman here asking for you. She says it's urgent. I knew before she finished the sentence. Elaine stood near the windows when I stepped out, her shoulders slumped, her confidence stripped away. No dramatic entrance, no raised voice, just exhaustion. They signed, she said immediately. My mother signed the statement. She admitted she used your authorization without telling you. I felt something loosen in my chest, not relief, closure. And Tracy, I asked. Elaine looked down. The bank opened a separate investigation. She disappeared yesterday, changed numbers, left town, I think. I nodded. That tracks. Elaine swallowed. I told them everything. I didn't protect anyone. I studied her face. She looked older somehow. Not weaker, just exposed. I'm sorry, she said, for Sunday, for all of it. I believed she was sorry. I also knew that apologies don't rewind choices. I should have chosen you, she whispered. I met her eyes. You chose comfort. That's not the same thing. She flinched, but she didn't argue. I'm not here to fight, she said. I needed you to know I understand now. I nodded slowly. Understanding comes late sometimes. She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. These are copies, everything the lawyer asked for. I took it. Our fingers didn't touch. Thank you, I said. Elaine hesitated. Do you want to try to fix us? The question hung there heavy and fragile. I thought of the kitchen, the grocery bag, the text that said the list was closed. I thought of how easily my place had been erased. I want to live in a house where my presence isn't negotiable, I said quietly. And I don't think you can offer that. Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. I understand. She turned and walked out without another word. A week later, I went back to the apartment one last time. I packed the rest of my things in silence. Books from the shelves, clothes from drawers we'd shared. In the kitchen, I paused where I'd stood with the bag of groceries, the memory no longer sharp, just clear. Before I left, I wrote a note. Not angry, not dramatic, just honest. I wished for family. You offered conditions. I'm choosing myself. I left the keys on the counter and closed the door behind me. Today, my life is smaller in some ways, quieter, but it's mine. My credit is intact. My name is clean. My silence is no longer permission. And if there's one thing I learned through all of this, it's this: respect doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives in paperwork boundaries and the courage to walk away from a table where you were never meant to shrink. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever felt pushed aside or made to believe you didn't quite belong, I'd love to hear from you. Share a comment below and let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes it's the quiet stories that remind us we're not alone. These stories aren't told for shock value. They're told for understanding, and there are many more waiting to be shared. If you'd like to keep listening, to keep reflecting, subscribe, and walk this path with us, the journey is only beginning.